perhaps a lot of that is U.S. history, obviously. And then eighth grade, they're taking U.S. history. So by eighth grade, they feel very comfortable, and social studies is very easy. And then what happens is we kind of transition to a more European centric history course, and none of it they have ever had. So it's very, very challenging. Um, Not to worry, I will work very hard to get students caught up and progress. And my goal really is to make sure that when they get to Honors U.S. History 1, they don't feel overwhelmed at that point. I think they should feel when they get to Honors U.S. History 1 that there's kind of a seamless transition, a slow and steady incline, not a big gap up. That's what I have experienced in past years. Students who felt that they weren't challenged enough, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're hit and they're overwhelmed. So we're trying to avoid that. This year in our world history class, we are going to cover a time period roughly from the Renaissance, and hopefully we'll get to the modern era around World War I. Sometimes we don't quite make it. That's usually my goal, but I think technically we don't really have to get there. But I like to go from the Renaissance roughly. We go through some major time periods that have really had an effect on our world and particularly our country. So we'll look at the Renaissance. We'll look at the Reformations, the science revolutions, the Enlightenment, Industrial Revolution, the Age of Exploration, imperialism, nationalism, all kinds of things that have kind of shaped our world for good or for ill, really. But that's kind of where we stand on what we're studying this year. I know the class title is World History, and we do look at world history. However, there is a large emphasis, perhaps, on world history that has greatly influenced where we live today in the United States. So I know that's been a question for some students in the past. But yeah, a lot of the history is sort of pointing towards where we are today. Our textbook is the Western Heritage 11th edition, published around 2010. It is a very difficult text for the honors students. If I had to pinpoint what the toughest thing about the honors world history class was, I would probably say the text. It's an AP European history textbook, essentially. And I've told the students already that what that means is typically you might have seniors or college students using this textbook. It's a very difficult textbook. It's not impossible, but it does require students to read carefully, and it does challenge them. A lot of times I think we get into a situation where we are comfortable with the level at which we read, and we settle for that. And if students are learning to read in the lower grade levels and they get to middle school and they feel like they can read just about anything, then why challenge yourself and move forward, I guess. But here we are going to challenge them and ask them to progress in their reading ability. And I believe that at the end of this year, if the students have been diligent and disciplined in working with this text, they will have advanced quite a bit in their reading ability. A last note on the text, I would encourage that you ask your students to read on a regular basis in a consistent manner. So for example, my 7-year-old at home, she has to read at least 20 minutes a night of reading that is not necessarily homework reading. She'll read to us, and she's figured out that if she does it consistently, it kind of makes things easy. If she puts it off and waits to the last minute before bedtime, or if she doesn't do it for a night and has to make it up the next night, it snowballs and becomes much more challenging. Your students are less likely to succeed if they are putting off their reading or not doing their reading. In fact, if they are not doing the reading, I can almost guarantee you that they will not do well in my class. If they are putting off the reading to the last minute, I can almost guarantee you that the information will not stick. It'll overwhelm them, and they will not do well on tests or quizzes. So a consistent and regular reading in small chunks, I think, is the best way to go. I know some students do not like the PDFs that are put on Classroom, and that's okay. Most of the students, I think, have gotten a textbook by now, and they can keep that textbook at home for the most part. If we are going to use it in class on a class activity or group project, we can simply use their Chromebooks for the PDFs. But for those that do like the PDFs, I recommend printing them out and making notes all over them, highlighting all over them. We can't do that with the text. It's actually quite an expensive textbook. We need to keep them nice and in good shape. But if they print out the PDFs, man, they can make all kinds of personal notes and highlights. One of the more important topics to hit on here is probably the grade weights. I have a Power School grade book that is weighted into categories. We have tests at 60%. I have a semester final at 10% and assignments at 30%. Honestly, I will probably have more short quizzes than assignments. So I would encourage your students to keep that in mind as we are doing our readings on a regular basis. Over time, they will get used to my quizzes and they'll kind of know what I'm looking for, and that will really help them as they're reading to kind of engage that text and figure out what it is I think is important and that I will be hitting on as a concept in class. I know people might disagree with me, but I think it's important to have a grade weight system that really emphasizes testing and quizzes. In past years, whether it be regular world history or even honors, sometimes I've made certain assignments worth a lot, and then maybe it makes the quiz or the test meaningless. And I think not all students would say this or think this, but if the test becomes meaningless, why prepare? Why read? And so in the past, I really feel like I've had students try really hard not to read and try to do okay just by kind of calculating what in Power School is most important. And I want to get away from that. I want students to progress in reading. And so for that reason, I am asking them to take quizzes on a regular basis and making those quizzes really important. And I think by doing that, we can really improve reading scores and kind of push kids to understand that reading and the skill set that they're gaining is maybe more important than some regurgitation on paper or regurgitation of someone else's assignment. So, yeah, I'm really pushing reading. I think it'll be really good for them and really important for their future success in the other honors classes that they will have coming down the pipeline. One last thought before I forget here. I told the students that it's important to read before. If I did a lecture or a class discussion and wrote all the notes on the board and then we took a quiz, they could simply just pay attention in class and do okay, more than likely. And I know students probably have done that in other classes and even in my past classes. But I think reading ahead of time and then taking a quiz on that not only tells me, what they got out of the text, but it also prepares them for the next lecture or class discussion. And if they have already read the text before I do whatever I do in class, then they're more prepared to be a part of that class. They're more prepared to ask questions, to criticize, to make comments. And I think in a way that actually makes our class way more interesting when it's a collaborative sort of class period than when I'm just talking at them and they're furiously writing notes trying to prepare themselves for the next quiz. Just a note on schoolwork and homework, late work, makeup policies. Typically, there is no late work in my honors class. Basically follow the school policies on makeup, so that's not a big deal. But late work is the kicker. It's pretty easy to understand and remember. There is no late work. Now, with that said, I think sometimes there are extenuating circumstances that might sort of change a late work situation into a makeup situation. So if you think you have a extenuating circumstance, I recommend that you contact me or have your student talk with me, and we'll kind of go from there. But for the most part, and I mean like 99.9% of the time, there is no late work. So just be prepared for that. Again, I know a lot of students think it sounds harsh, but they have to understand that when they procrastinate, it can create more work on my end. And it does not make my wife happy when I get to work at 6, leave at 5:30, get here at 6, and then I come home at 4:30 or 5 and have to sit down at the computer and deal with issues that could have been avoided. Now, if they can't be avoided, I'm more than happy to do what I can for students, obviously. But sometimes some of the stuff I deal with is it's just total procrastination and students dropping the ball. So again, if that's making more work for me, then it kind of is a problem for my household. So there it is. No late work. I think it'll help the students, and I know it will help me. In closing here, I would just ask that you communicate with me if you ever have any questions, concerns, or comments. I can't guarantee a response immediately, but I will do my best to try to get back with you at least within 24 hours. If I can't give you a full response, I'll at least get back with you to let you know that I've received your email or phone call or whatever it is, and that I will try to figure out and think about or respond in an appropriate way as soon as I can. Contact information here, briley@capon.org is my email for school, and I really think that's the best way to get a hold of me. On most days, that's hooked up and synced with my phone, so no matter where I am, probably will have access to that email and see that right away. And again, if not responding right away, at least I can be thinking about whatever issue you might have for me. Also, Google Classroom, you should be able to add yourself if you have a Gmail account to your students' Google Classroom. You can kind of see what they are seeing, and you should be able to get parent summaries on whatever's been posted for the week. My office hours for students, typically I am here well before they are, so I would say no earlier than 7. I'm usually here earlier, but that's because I like to do a lot of my work in the mornings. I'm a morning person. I'm not an afternoon person. My brain works a lot better in the morning, so I do get here early. But they can probably get here on most days as early as 7, and I'll be in room 112. I will stay till 3:30, and if a student needs me beyond 3:30, I'm willing or open at least to stay. I think that students have not done a good job in the past of making appointments. Sometimes they'll see those office hours and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I'll come at 7," and that might just be the day that I have to take my daughter to school, which is not often, but it happens occasionally, and then I'm not here till 7:30. So if they make an appointment, if they shoot me a message, I'm able to kind of confirm that I will be there or not be there. And again, if I don't see them by 3:30, usually I go home. So those are my office hours. I can't really think of anything else here for contact, but I want to thank you. I want to let you know that I'm really excited to have your students in class, and I hope we have a really great year, and I really hope and pray that we can avoid any more disruptions to our learning environment here at Cape and Mount Carmel with the old COVID. God bless, and have a good evening.